Want to listen to this Ivory Tower Boiler Room episode and all of our Ivory Tower Boiler Room episodes ad free? Head to our Patreon, patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room for $5 a month. You get all of our ad free episodes, our video interviews, and our bonus episodes. See you there.
I'm really reclaiming it. I think it's also just such a ridiculous stereotype to begin with. I think it's just so funny, where it's just like, oh, I want to have mutual sexual pleasure with people and have honest, healthy, and communicative relationships where I get to explore fun sex. Oh, that makes you greedy. It's like, what's greedy about wanting to have pleasure and relationships with people? Isn't that what life is about? Having human connections with people. And this idea that bisexuals are greedy because it's like, oh, yes, like we want to date and have sex with people is just absurd to begin with.
LGBT stories are universal, but each one speaks to the individual heart and soul of the writer telling it. Do you have a story to tell? Have you been moved by an LGBT book, film, painting, television show, or other form of media? If so, the Gay and Lesbian Review wants to hear from you. The G&LR believes in bringing awareness to queer art and artists through reviews, commentary, and thought pieces in which the author relates their personal lives to a particular piece of art, a novel, a movie, or what have you. In addition to the articles published in the print magazine, the G&LR also publishes articles on its blog, as well as personal essays on its popular Here's My Story section. This allows people like you to share their own experiences with our readers. To learn more about submitting either to the print or the online edition of the G&LR, visit georeview.org. That's GLREVIEW.org. And scroll down to the bottom of the page to find a link to their writer's guidelines. If you have questions, email me at stephen.hemrick@georeview.org. The G&LR can't wait to see what you have to say.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So I'm going to read the bio of my guest today. I have to preface all of this with most of our Ivory Tower Boiler Room episodes are marked as explicit on all the podcast platforms. But, if your virgin ears out there are not ready for a bi-male sexual empowering presence of us talking about everything sexual, um, then still listen and then recommend it to your friends. But you've been warned. That's my warning. Okay, so Zachary Zane, who's joining me, writes this really amazing column. It's called Sexplain It, and it's a sex and relationship advice column at Men's Health, where he answers a range of questions pertaining to masculinity, ethical non-monogamy, sexual insecurities, and the LGBTQ community. His work has appeared in the New York Times, Vice, GQ, Rolling Stone, The Advocate, Tamron Hall, and Nightline. He is joining me from Brooklyn. So I'm on Long Island, little like 50 miles away from you. But yeah, it's wonderful to be joined with the official Boyslut, which all of you out there, Zachary, when this is coming out, his Memoir and Manifesto has just been published. So get your hands on Boyslut, a Memoir and Manifesto. And I
Yes,
think they
it's
can get
out
their
May
ears.
9th.
Yeah, and they can get their
Yes,
ears listening.
I have an Audible. Yeah, I have an Audible as well, and I'm the one actually reading the Audible. Which someone else needs to listen to it because there's no way in hell I'm listening to myself reread the book again. That was a harrowing process. That I hopefully never have to read a book of mine again.
I'll listen to it for you, Zachary, and then message you.
Thank you. I don't
I'm
think I can
sure it's
listen to
gonna
my
sound good.
voice for. No, I'm sure it does. No, they were very happy with it. I'm happy with it, but I think just hearing my voice for an entire book would be like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah, well, it's like when I listen back to these podcast episodes. I mean, you get accustomed, but I hear my idiosyncrasies, so I can understand. Um, well, first things first, I was like, how am I going to hook Zachary Zane? Because he's on all of this media circuit, publicity tour extravaganza. And I was like, well, what's a nice Jewish boy like Zachary Zane doing claiming the term boy slut? I mean, I think it's so beautifully rebellious, but also, I mean, there's a lot of queer male Jewish energy and
There sure
trailblazer.
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so I just wonder when you look back at that Zachary from Los Angeles, right? Or you grew up in the Valley, from what I remember.
Correct.
Did my homework, and you begin our experience in your memoir and manifesto with this image of seeing your therapist, your childhood therapist, and you imagine him naked. And like that's our beginning journey. I mean, did you now think, oh, this is where I would have ended up in my career?
Oh my God, no. I originally was going to get a PhD in clinical psychology. I was working at Harvard Medical Center as a smoking cessation researcher and counselor, and I studied psych and neuroscience in school. That's why I did my internships and I took the GRE, I took the subject test, I had academic papers that I published where I was the first author, and I was about to apply, and I kind of had a uh like panic attack. I was like, for the seemingly altruistic profession, they are cutthroat, they are nasty, they will steal your work, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I ended up starting to write, and then I wrote a piece about bisexuality, my first piece ever that actually went viral, and then from that I started writing more and more about bisexuality because there was such a dearth of content, and the content that was out was, this is almost 10 years ago, but the content that was out was very much like 10 things to never say to a bisexual person, or trying to prove to gay and straight people that bisexual people are real and exist. But there wasn't any content for like bi people by people. So it's just like, okay, how do you deal with internalized biphobia? How do you deal with explicit biphobia from other people? How do you come out to your family? What are some of the challenges that come with dating as a bisexual person? And I kind of filled in the gap there to answering these questions and really making bi content for bi people. And that kind of took off. And before I knew it, like, I did not think that this was going to be my profession. This was going to be my job. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, and now, I get paid to go to sex clubs and write about it. I go and have sex with people, and that's part of my job. And I'm thinking of this man who had so much sexual shame when he was 8 years old that he would be in therapy, imagining his therapist naked, proceed to cry about it because I thought I was this terrible, evil, perverted, disgusting kid for imagining people naked. And I had so much sexual shame. And then, yeah, it is a complete 180. And when I kind of get frustrated or overwhelmed by my job or my life, I try to like remember how far I have grown, how lucky I am that I have this incredible career where I'm able to do this. I'm able to reach people and help people and speak to a community that I love and I feel a part of and very equipped to do. So when I'm sometimes drowning in emails and want to blow everything up, I'm like, Zach, look how far you've come. Look how much you're helping this community. Look how awesome your job is. Let's take a deep breath. Emails are annoying, but you'll be okay here.
Yeah, well, and like, did you feel that your upbringing, right? Like you talk about, you just said that you felt this shame. And I mean, your whole boy slut persona slash, I call it your empowering force that you brought in with, not
Yeah.
just your memoir and manifesto, which I mean, we'll get into, right? You do lay out this difference between memoir and manifesto, but you also have this amazing Substack called Boyslut, and I subscribe to it, to do my work. And like
Oh,
it
is that why you
is
subscribe?
that's why I
I'm
subscribe. Yeah,
teasing. I'm
just for the
teasing. I'm teasing. Hmm.
professionalization experience.
Yeah.
But you have one from March 20th. I had a complete stranger pick me up from the airport. To thank him, I fucked his brains out. Um, and then I like this other that says, Um, love your mommy and daddy. Breeding the biggest, juiciest, heftiest daddy ass rewired my baby queer brain. And
I do want
I
to
just
wait,
love
sorry,
these
continue. I
topics.
don't want to interrupt here.
No, go.
I want to clarify that so the book is different than the zine. So I have the Substack, and it's kind of like a newsletter zine where I publish nonfiction erotica by myself, and then also kinksters from across the globe here. And this was kind of a side project that people loved it, absolutely loved it, and I loved writing these pieces. And people, it's not just like a raunchy sex story. There's always something larger about how you overcame sexual shame, or the intersection between, let's say, polyamory and bisexuality and sex, or an intersection between like sex and tech. So it speaks to something larger in society, in culture, and then it's also very hot and raunchy as well. And I should clarify that the book itself is not just like those essays. Those are just like hot, sexy, fun, independent sex stories, versus this really is a memoir about how I was able to overcome sexual shame and create and be a part of this bisexual, polyamorous, kink positive community. So I always am trying to differentiate between the tone and the style of the digital zine and then also the book, because it is different. But I think one thing that's interesting is, because I write this zine and I'm so explicit and graphic and open about my sex life, they kind of assume that, oh, Zach is such an open person, which actually isn't necessarily that true. I feel very comfortable and very safe writing about my hairy asshole and me getting pegged or whatever the fuck. But like when it comes to other aspects of myself and what I share, I actually don't share that much. And if you notice on social media, I always keep things like light, fun, flirty, and sexy. I'm not talking about really when I'm crying over a breakup. I don't Instagram that live. I don't talk about relationship with my parents. I don't talk about the times I've really struggled with partners or treated partners poorly. Of course, that was never on purpose. It was never malicious, but because I was coming from a place of shame and insecurities, I lashed out and was not great to my partners. And in this book, I really delve into that. So this book for me is significantly more vulnerable. It's significantly more open and scary than me just writing a crazy sex story.
Hi, this is Andrew, and I'm interrupting what I know is an enthralling interview because I want you all to know that we are sponsored by Broadview Press. And if you don't know, Broadview Press is an independent academic publisher who publishes books covering topics like English studies, writing, philosophy, history, gender studies. And every season on the podcast, I interview one of the Broadview Press authors. So for the fall, we had Ann Stevens on to talk about literary theory and criticism. She played a Wizard of Oz literary game with us. She talked about why Bridgerton actually involves literary theory. So does 50 Shades of Grey. Who knew? And also, we just had on Jeffrey Weinstock, who wrote the first ever pop culture analysis book. So, I am all things a lover of pop culture, especially my Hollywood topics, Real Housewives, the list goes on and on. And he also wrote the book called The Mad Scientist's Guide to Composition, where he's writing a book teaching students about how to write rhetorical strategies, but it's all around this metaphor of being in the mad scientist laboratory, because as you'll learn when you hear our episode with Jeffrey, he is a gothic and horror fanatic. And I mean that in all the best ways possible. So you don't want to miss Broadview Press's exclusive discount because you're listening to the podcast. All of you get an automatic 20% off. Use the code Ivory Tower for 20% off site-wide on all of their books. So in our show notes, we have a link to Broadview Press. Make sure you click the link, put in Ivory Tower, and you're going to get 20% off your order. So enjoy your reading, everyone. Yeah, well, and as we think of TV film examples, like I don't want to I know you were raised by a Reformed Jewish family, which for, all um of those who are not up on their nomenclature of the difference between, Reform, Orthodox, conservative Judaism, right? Reform is the more liberal minded usually.
What
And
did I call it? I have a brief description of being like, so I'm reform, and if you don't know what this means, and I described it something. Where is it?
yeah, well,
Sorry,
I
keep
have to,
talking. I'm gonna look
yeah, but
through. Yeah.
like what fascinates me is it usually is that reform coming out Jewish family experience that we do see. And like, I don't know if you remember, but Queer as Folk, one of the characters has that Jewish mother who's like the biggest ally of P Flag, and she owns does she own the diner? I'm trying to remember, but she's like
Yeah.
a waitress at the diner. And we even see that in, I think, Not Another Gay Movie. It's also a Jewish mother. Like the Jewish mother and the gay son and the queer son is a
It's a
big
trope.
media trope.
It's a
Mhm.
trope. No, so I talk about, okay, I can read this little section from it where I talk about knowing that my sexual shame was not because of religion. So I say religion wasn't the culprit. I grew up in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley, aka the Valley. Both my parents are liberal, reform-ish Jews. In case you aren't familiar, Reform Jews are the quote-unquote chiller denomination who tend to be more culturally Jewish than strictly religious. Even though I did study the Torah, Talmud, and Mishnah in day school, my parents made it very clear from a young age that we saw the Bible as fiction. It was not the word of God, so I could pick and choose the good parts and let go of the rest. All of the stuff about homosexuality being an abomination, honey, you can just skip right over that part, Mama Zane said. To be honest, I'm happy that religion wasn't the root of my sexual shame, because frankly, it's so basic to get sexually fucked up by organized religion, and I ain't no basic bitch.
Well, I absolutely love that you talk about that because, like, my upbringing, I had come out in ninth grade in high school, and
Wow,
now I'm
fucking
30.
young.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's been 15 years, and
Yeah, it was before
I
everyone
was
and their mother was coming out in middle school.
I know, I was a
Sorry, keep going. Yeah.
trendsetter, Zachary.
You were a
But
trailblazer. You were.
trailblazer, always ahead of the curve. No, just joking. But I grew up Catholic, and I have though, um, like like I have Jewish ancestry that I started to discover actually in the last few years. And I've always like had more, I don't know, now it kind of makes sense. My family does have a Jewish aesthetic, especially my dad's side. And I'm like, I always was rejecting the Catholic, like it was South Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey outside Philly, but like we still had these courses on especially not masturbating. Like it got very intense in middle
Yeah.
school about, you know, like I was getting that message, but then from our public schooling, I was actually watching HIV/AIDS documentaries and learning about the health aspects of masturbation and pornography. So it was like
Yeah.
these two, like where religion I was seeing Catholicism was really hammering down this abomination narrative, and I actually rejected it and was like, no, I'm gonna come out. And I actually came out to my friend when we were in Catholic mass. So I was
Oh,
a
wow.
rebel, but I'm like, no, this religion doesn't speak to me. Which everyone can make up their own decision, right?
Of
Make
course.
up their mind about that. But so I think it's important that you explain this was not coming, your shame wasn't rooted in religion for you. Like that's
It's and
not,
what I would
yeah.
yeah, I think what I was trying to do by this, and again, even though I said I ain't no basic bitch, obviously that's a joke, and we're all, experience sex negativity or sexual shame for a myriad of reasons. But that was kind of the point of it, where I feel like I actually grew up in this sex positive, liberal, like queer affirming household. I had gay uncles on both sides of my family, my mom's brother, my dad's brother. So I knew it was a-okay to be gay, and still I had so much sexual shame around my bisexuality, just around sexuality in general. And it shows just how pervasive sexual shame is and sex negativity is and how insidious it is. So even though I didn't have this traumatic moment, let's say, when I got like kicked out of my house for being gay, I still did not have a healthy relationship with sex. And that's kind of the point of this, where it's just like, no matter who you are, no matter your gender, your race, your sexual orientation, your age, we grow up in a society that's sex negative. So we're going to soak up messages from media, from our peers, from teachers, from family, friends, religion, culture, everything. So you just can't escape it. No one grows to the age of 25 and ends up with a healthy sexuality, by accident. It has to be something that you work on. You have to actively combat all these aspects of society. So the reason why I was bringing this up was to show that, like, hey, no matter who you are, whether it's religion or something else, you probably don't have the healthiest relationship with sex, and that's okay. And just because you didn't have this terrible upbringing doesn't automatically mean, oh, you have a healthy and great relationship with sex
Yeah. Well, and how
and
long
your
ago
identity.
how long ago was it when you actually first started your Men's Health Sexplain It column?
I think it's been end of 2019, I think. I think it's maybe
Okay.
been 3.5 years, and I was writing for them beforehand. So I just didn't have the column, but I was writing kind of as a freelancer, kind of these like sex and relationship features or SEO content, like search engine optimization content. So writing stuff like, what are anal beads? And, ideally when you type that in, they want Men's Health's article to come up first. So I was writing that type of content, and I was doing kind of a great job with them. And I pitched this idea because I realized they didn't have kind of a modern sex column, and they jumped all over it.
Mm. Well, and when did you leave Harvard, working at Harvard?
Oh, that was years ago. So
Oh, okay.
that was 2000. I stopped there. I went there right after school. So June 2020. Sorry. Wow. Hold on. June 2013. And then my last month was in March 2016. So I was there for almost 3 years. And at the time, by the time I'd quit, I'd already started freelance writing. I'd been freelance writing for almost a year at that point, where I had enough contacts and work and gigs that I was able to kind of transition from that into full-time freelance writing.
So when you started freelance writing, did you feel that you had the intellectual freedom, we'll call it, or capacity to be so vulnerably open about sexual topics? Or has this really been a journey throughout the years of like, okay, I'm getting closer and closer to my authentic voice, and like now I can finally let it out?
It was definitely a journey over the years. It wasn't like by the time I started writing, it's like, I have no more sexual shame. I'm going to write about everything. I don't give a fuck what anyone else says. Like, I wish it was like that, but that's just not the reality of it. And I think each time, I definitely came of age, like, or not came of age, that's not the right word, but became a writer during the era of like the commodification of first person identity. And what I mean by that is like, people, like, places would pay you $50 for you to write the most vulnerable first person essay you've ever written, and then you might not even get paid for it. So they were really taking advantage of freelance writers and their experiences, making a lot of money off of us and paying us hardly anything. But that was kind of what was in, like really in, when I was writing. So I started sharing my life story, because that, as someone who didn't study writing in school, like, I was definitely not the best writer by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not the best writer now by any stretch of the imagination. I have a very unique voice that I'm very proud of. I like the way that I write. I think it's very funny. It's very conversational. But this book isn't going to win a Pulitzer for literary prose. You know what I mean? So the way I was able to get work in the beginning wasn't because I was a great writer, but was because of my experiences. And so that is how I became a writer. I became a writer by oversharing aspects of myself. And then it just kind of became more commonplace. And again, I didn't start by like, actually, the first piece I wrote was already pretty vulnerable. It was a piece for Exo Jane's Vertical. It Happened to Me. And the way what they titled it was, I came out as gay and now can't, I came out as bi and now can't date anyone gay or straight. And it was about how much I struggled after coming out as bi. I thought the world was going to be my oyster when it comes to dating. I thought women would date me and gay men would date me, but women didn't, because they were afraid I was using bi as a stepping stone on the way to gay, and they would like ghost me or shame me or say pretty fucked up shit to me. And then gay men were extremely condescending and pedantic. They would be like, "Oh, honey, I was bi too. You'll get there. You'll get there." Like, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, and so I hated that. then I dated this bi woman, and everything, I felt so accepted for my bisexuality. I didn't worry about appearing more effeminate or acting more effeminate. And she encouraged me to embrace those aspects of myself. And it was truly incredible dating another bi person. So that was already the first story that went viral that I wrote. That was already extremely personal. So it started off personal. But again, over time, I got more comfortable sharing kind of more and more and more. And in a weird way, the internet and my work demanded it from me. Like I wouldn't have been able to keep writing unless if I was sharing more vulnerable experiences. I think after this book, I can't write a memoir every 10 years. I mean, I can't write a memoir every year. And I don't even want to write a memoir every 10 years. You know what I mean? So moving into something where it's like, I laid it all out in this book. I shared so much of myself. I am vulnerable. I am on the floor with my heart's beating in my hand. I don't have too much more to share. So I'm excited to potentially talk a little bit less about me moving forward. I think I'm going to write a little bisexual novel next, which I'm very excited for. But sorry, I don't remember what your original question was. Oh, but getting to where I am, no, I think it was just over time. I started sharing more and more and then just becoming more comfortable with it and receiving positive feedback for it. Where the more vulnerable I was, yes, some people were assholes, but a lot of people resonated with it, being like, oh my God, this mirrors my story. I felt so alone. Thank you so much for sharing. And I was removing some of the shame and stigma that they had. And that really encouraged me to keep doing this because I felt like I was having a positive impact. And I was, and I am.
Yeah, well, and in the book, you make this what I'll call um might seem provocative, but it's this very insistent phrase that you are a greedy bisexual. And like that history itself, I mean, of the greedy bisexual is a put down, but you're turning the table and taking this power back. So like what for you, why was that so important to say like, okay, no, I'm going to claim this stereotype?
It's
Hi, this is Andrew. So, as some of you might know, I've been such a fan of the Gay and Lesbian Review, bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics that publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines, as well as a slew of reviews of books, plays, and movies, and a number of special features, such as artist profiles and the popular art memo column. Did you know we actually had two of the writers on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room podcast, Ignacio Darnad and Vernon Rosario? So if you haven't, make sure you listen to those episodes. Each GNLR issue brings you consistently intelligent, lively, thought provoking articles focused on a unifying theme and brings together the leading minds on the topic. You won't find a lot about the latest dating fads or fashion trends, though you might find articles about online dating as a social phenomenon, like Grindr, which I have some experience with, or the gay influence on 20th century fashion. Now, for a special offer, when you subscribe to the GNLR, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. That's 7 instead of 6. Visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org. Click subscribe and enter promo code ITBR for your free issue. And as an added bonus, you'll receive online access to all archived issues of the magazine. Enjoy your reading.
I'm really reclaiming it. I think it's also just such a ridiculous stereotype to begin with. I think it's just so funny where it's just like, oh, I want to have mutual sexual pleasure with people and have honest, healthy, and communicative relationships where I get to explore fun sex. Oh, that makes you greedy. It's like, what's greedy about wanting to have pleasure and relationships with people? Isn't that what life is about? Having human connections with people. And this idea that bisexuals are greedy because it's like, oh, yes, like we want to date and have sex with people is just absurd to begin with. And so I've kind of like pointing out the absurdity by saying it and also showing like, yes, like if you want to call it greedy, even though that has a negative connotation, you can, but there's nothing wrong with being greedy. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have a lot of kinky experiences or multiple sexual partners, or if you're someone who, your bisexual identity and your polyamorous identity intersect the way that it does for me, where it's like, I could not be monogamous. And there's nothing wrong with that because I'm honest about it. I communicate that to my partners, and I'm able to pursue pleasure and have these healthy different forms of relationships with multiple different people. You call that greedy. I just call that living my life to the fullest here. And I can tell part of the greedy stereotype is definitely an aspect of jealousy. I think it's a lot of people who wish they could be, greedy bisexuals in a sense, who wish they were so sexually liberated and unafraid and able to have multiple different partners or sexual experiences. So I definitely think it's coming from a place of people wishing they were us without sounding like a hot bitch, but I am going to sound like a hot bitch. Why not?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I'm a gay man, but I definitely, love, embrace, my bi men out there. But also think it's so important that you have such a large platform now, especially with Boyslut and, having an actual book in existence, and that it is so there's not a lot of representation still of bi men in TV, in film, in pop culture, in reality shows. Um, so yeah, you're
This is like the first, obviously bisexual men have written books, they've written memoirs, we've been around for forever, but this is, to my knowledge, the first like memoir that really details a bi man's experience being bi. We have those for gay memoirs, we have lesbian memoirs, we even have that for bi women. We have like Jen Winston's Greedy, which was a great book and I recommend reading. Again, the bi representation is coming out much later. That book only came out, I think, 2 years ago. But yeah, I'm, to my knowledge, the first bi man to write a book about like sex and sexuality and openly discussing bisexuality, like ever in a memoir format.
Yeah.
So we really are. I feel like bisexual visibility is actually doing well right now. I think about how it was 10 years ago, and there was really little. There was like, I remember Googling bi guy in college because I thought I might be bi. And the only thing that came up were like studies about bi men having or spreading HIV, maybe the off piece about like 10 things to never say to a bisexual person. But like, that was it. Now you type in bi guy or bisexual man. I think I'm like 2 of the first 4 articles that come up, number 1. But like, there's just so much more visibility and more people talking about their experiences being bisexual, addressing health disparities, addressing biphobia, addressing how to meet other bi people and cultivate a bisexual community. There's so much more visibility for bisexuality now than there's ever been in the United States, and that's pretty incredible. We have a long ways to go, but I like that I'm kind of at the forefront of this. I'm proud to say that Boyslut's kind of the first book of its type like this, and I really, really hope that this inspires a bunch of other bi people of all races and genders and everything to share their experiences too.
Yeah. Well, I hear, Zachary, in September, I did this whole episode about celebrating my 30th birthday at the Belvedere in Cherry Grove and like unveiling some of the behind the scenes of like being in a clothing optional, like all male experience and what that was like. But I have to say, like, even when I talk about, oh, I'm going to Fire Island, or to the general public, um, they automatically think that there's orgies happening, which, you know, does happen, I'm sure. I haven't been to an orgy, just to put that out there. But I know that they happen. But why do you? I'm sure you've had to definitely deal with the scrutiny of, and I'm not saying it's a negative, but the general public, I feel when it comes to gay men, they already like think of, okay, now I'm starting to see you as a sexual object in a way. But then when it comes to even being a bi man, like, do you feel there's even more of this public perception of trying to think of you in terms of sex? Like, is there a difference between
Well,
gay men and bi men?
it's also, I did it to myself in a way. You know what I mean? I kind of welcome objectification and fetishization in the way that I speak and what I post online and how I talk. It's again, I'm not saying I'm asking for it, but the way that I present and talk about how slutty I am and how I want to hook up with everyone and how I'm sharing my sex stories, like, yeah, people have these perceptions about me, and I've cultivated those perceptions. So so when it comes to me specifically, it's a little bit different. I think, speaking for other bi men, or at least talking about other bi men, of course, I can only speak to myself, but I do think obviously there are these like hypersexualization stereotypes that, while accurate for me, is probably not accurate for the vast majority of bi men, who are just like, there are slutty bi men, there are monogamous bi men, there are bi men who have never had sex with anyone and they're still virgins because that's how it is. There are, people who fall on the asexual spectrum who are also bisexual. So, just like every single group in the history of mankind, we are diverse. And so for those guys who are definitely more, let's say, on the monogamous spectrum or vanilla spectrum, or just not, someone who has as many sexual partners as me, I could see that being really challenging, to have this stereotype that you're hypersexual when you're just like, I'm just trying to find one person and fall in love, and you make it seem like I'm going to orgies. Like, God, that's really frustrating.
Yeah, well, and I even have friends of mine who I've wanted to take to Fire Island who are interested in men, and they don't want to go because they're so nervous to overcome the stereotype of what they think Fire Island, or a lot of the times they think there's going to be this judgy clique. But I say there's all different varieties who go to Fire Island or go to any of these LGBTQ destinations.
It's whatever you want it to be. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like, there are definitely the people who go to Fire Island to party and drink and have sex, and I've definitely done that, and that's been very fun. I've been to Fire Island where, like, I have a week off work and I just want to tan by the pool, chill, listen to music with friends, smoke some weed, have some cute family dinners, and I'm asleep by 10:30 at night, and I'm not going out. So it really is kind of a pick your own adventure. I think there's a lot one can do at Fire Island, or truthfully any gay destination for the most part. Although if you go to a gay sex resort, probably less to do than besides have gay sex, but Fire Island, there's more to do.
Yeah, well, if anyone this summer wants to find me on Fire Island, I will be laying at the beach, usually nude and swimming, and
Love
reading.
that.
That's
I'll,
my
I'll
Fire
come.
Island experience. And like to
Okay.
me, well, and I think you'll find me, Zachary. I'm just
No, I have my book tour throughout May and June, and then come July, I feel like I'm gonna be a free man, and I definitely want to get my butt to Fire Island. Although I don't think I got any shares, which means I've definitely done it where I go, wait for the last ferry to leave, and then it kind of lights a fire under my ass, being like, I gotta get laid, and I gotta dick down someone so good, so well that they invite me to sleep over. I haven't
or you
done that
could
in a
just get a
while. I feel
hotel
like
room. There are hotels,
too, but
Zachary.
and it's expensive, and I like the fun. I like the challenge of it. And worst comes to worst, I fall asleep on the beach. They're like, I'll
There
be
you
okay.
go.
But I love it. I'm definitely gonna be in Fire Island naked reading as well.
Well, and there's something that I don't want to let for me, that's how I started to overcome my sexual shame, was actually feeling so liberated, being in my body, present, and realizing, oh, the nudity is not always doesn't have to always be eroticized. Like that there's so many nuanced meanings of what it's like to be connected to nature, for example, or to even be around other men who we're having conversations, but it has this safe space of expression for me. And like my writing too, like you've become a mentor of mine, Zachary, because I'm about to
Thank you.
receive my PhD in July, and I have so much
Congrats.
homoerotic, thank you, so much homoerotic language for the 19th century with poetry and literature. But like I've started to really embrace, oh, it's okay for me to explore my writing process and how it involves, say, listening to porn podcasts like Discretion Advised, which I love, or, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if you listen to that one, but like Mark McNamara is hilarious. Um,
Yeah.
or Two Bi Guys, which I know you were on, and I loved that, or
Yeah.
Justin J. Lay Miller. Yeah.
Justin Lay Miller.
His
Yeah.
Justin Lay Miller's Sex and Psychology podcast. And for the longest time in academia, I felt those conversations were only being had by, say, a sexologist like Justin, or Sex with Emily, for example, and her podcast. But
I
there's,
just recorded with her.
did you? Oh, amazing. Okay.
Yeah,
I love
she's
her
awesome.
podcast.
Yeah, I really do.
And for the longest time, there's been so much queer studies work, and there's been a lot of porn studies too in academia, but there's never really, in my opinion, been this public connection. Like, we know it exists, but there's never been a media and a university bridge. So like that's why it means a lot to talk with you, Zachary, because you've become a stepping stone and a guide for me of, oh, okay, I can be more vulnerable and claim my authenticity and not be afraid of the backlash. Like, I've always been afraid of, okay, who's going to call me out? Like, who's going to try to professionalize me, for example?
It's well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, and I'm really glad you shared that with me. And there's we still live in a sex negative society. There are real repercussions of presenting yourself as sexual.
Hi, this is Andrew. So, when I'm not here in the Ivory Tower boiler room, sometimes I'm actually invited to be on other podcasts as a guest. Well, there is one podcast run by Christian Garcia and his co-host Nate that I absolutely love. It is called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. So calling all you classic cinema fans out there and those who love queer theme cinema, which I think there's a lot of you who are listening right now where you've perked up. So follow them on Instagram at that OL Gay Classic Cinema. The first ever episode I was featured as a guest. It's The Sound of Music. I got to talk about being Captain Von Trapp in high school, and it's just such an exciting conversation. They've also featured discussions about Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, which features guests from the podcast The Garland Gab and Down the Yellow Brick Pod. There's a deep dive of Cinderella, and recently they had an episode on the film Giants starring Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean. And actually, one of the guests, Lauren Randall, I know from Stony Brook University's PhD English department. So shout out, Lauren. You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's definitely such a great listen. So why not listen to it after you listen to this current episode on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room?
Hey, Ivory Tower Boiler Room listeners and true crime friends. You've heard me gush over this incredible woman and her beautiful products. I'm talking about Mandy Made It. Mandy makes customized and original crochet and pre-cut goods. They are the perfect, unique, one-of-a-kind gift for literally anyone in your life. And she makes incredible home decor. I still have my pumpkins that I put out every fall. I just love them. Check her out on Instagram at MANDEE Made It, or search Mandy Made It on Facebook. To order, just slide into her DMs, and if you mention the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, you will receive a free personalized gift with your first order. So, go on Instagram and look up at Mandy Made It, and Mandy is spelled MANDEE. Again, her handle is at Mandy Made It, Mandy spelled MANDEE, and order today.
It's for me, it's almost like I went in this career because I did not want to have to hide. I did not want to have to, every time I got a new job at a lab, come out as bisexual, or it's polyamorous and we have the Christmas party and I want to bring a male partner and a female partner, and that like be a whole ordeal or issue. And like, I almost created a career for myself where like, I can be overly sexual and that is the point. I'm rewarded for it versus that is not 99.99% of professions. You know what I mean? Like there are real ramifications and repercussions to, embracing your sexual identity, which is really fucked and sad. But yeah, I think that's in large part why I kind of like carved out this career for me, because I did not want to have to ever hide or feel like I have to repeatedly come out. I just wanted to be me and be rewarded for being me.
Well, and I'm curious, how much does your work intersect with, say, the porn industry? Like, do you feel, because I know you're say that you go to sex clubs, but that doesn't directly tie to, say, the porn industry.
Well, like, again, I'm a writer. I'm a writer
Mm.
first and foremost. That is what I am. And so, I'm a sex relationship writer. Obviously, the porn industry is a lot of sex writing. So I've interviewed many porn stars over the years. I've done, articles and journalistic pieces just about something within the porn industry. But my relationship with it is me either, writing or using porn stars as resources or writing about the industry. So I'm kind of adjacent to it, but I'm a writer of it just because, yeah, that's part of sex. That's a huge part of sex is porn.
Yeah, well, and do you think because you are in Brooklyn and you're in the New York City metropolis and the Northeast
Yeah.
especially, or if you were in the West on the West Coast, for example, in the LA scene, San Francisco, San Diego even, do you feel that your voice would be there'd be more roadblocks because of a geographic area in which you're drawing your experience? Like, say we throw Zachary Zane into Mississippi, for example.
I think I'd be a lot more of a controversial figure there. I think absolutely. I'm very lucky and privileged to have kind of spent my life for the most part on the coasts, right? And I think it allows me to be more sexually open and free and to write more freely. And I think there are more careers here that allow me to write in the way that I want to. Yeah, I think my story would be very different if I grew up in rural Alabama or Mississippi.
Yeah. Well, and I never even asked you, what did you study as an undergrad, Zachary? I'm
Psychology,
curious.
but I focused on
Ah,
neuroscience too.
oh, okay. Okay. So you kind of,
Yeah.
I know neuroscience. Does that make its appearance, you feel, in any of the kind of work you're doing in terms of sex and relationship studies?
Oh, absolutely. And I love the sex and relationship studies that come out. And when I first started writing too, a lot of what I wrote about was writing about, like, the way that often media and articles like write about like pop psychology studies are like terribly. They're like oversimplified, reductive. They're making these larger claims that the study themselves cannot make. So I was writing really nuanced takes of new research study that came out and wrote it in a way that was digestible, but also honest and accurate and not oversimplifying the results. Um, and also my background is in research. Like I wanted to get a PhD to be a clinical psychologist, but like I didn't want to get an MD. I wanted a PhD because I like research. So still now research heavily influences my decisions. You know what I mean? And what I decide to discuss. I like that whenever I posit any argument, okay, there is research to back this up. It's not just something that I've said, there's actually research to support this. And you see, like I have a pretty extensive bibliography in my book. I am constantly quoting from academic papers that have come out. So I think that still heavily influences my writing, my research background, and my psychology background.
Yeah, no, you literally have a bibliography. So I would be very happy
Yeah.
as your instructor. Like, okay, he cited his sources, and this is wonderful for everyone. You know, you really are creating a pop genre in a way. Like you're creating a hybrid genre, I should say, of it's neither just popular
Excuse me.
or academic. It's this really nice in between.
Yeah, because academic can be really difficult to understand and needlessly wordy, and they kind of use this lexicon and this esoteric language that makes it very difficult for the average person to understand. And then on the other extreme, where it's like way oversimplified, it's like, well, no, hold on, we can understand more than this. It's like we're capable of a little bit of nuance here and doing that. And I think I've really found like kind of the sweet middle ground in between the two.
Yeah, actually, someone who's I have to like see what she's working on. I'm sure she is, but your work is reminding me of when I first figured out that there was a study called gender studies and sexuality studies as an undergrad at Kane University in North Jersey. That's where I went. And a fire got lit under me when I read Jessica Valenti's work, which, if you don't know, she like wrote some really interesting
Sex Object is quite a fabulous book.
Sex Object. Yeah.
A
So
book that I recommend. Yeah.
thank you. Okay, that was the book that I had read.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wonder what she's working on now. Okay. I'll have to like do a search. But do you feel like something that fascinates me is you're still working with men's health, and like I'm not going to let it go. You talked about you writing about what are anal beads, and I think that that would come as a shock to men's health readers because I had subscribed to Men's Health when I was younger, and there was really no LGBTQ discussions at all from what I remember. And like for them to have brought you on, like they really um took a chance to just like say, okay, we're going to now start talking about queer male experiences.
And I love that they're doing that. And, I'm part of kind of a newer generation of Men's Health. And again, I can't speak to, like, I'm not an employee there. I'm technically a freelancer and I don't want to, represent the brand, but I think they'll be okay with me saying this, where it's like, I really feel like 5 years ago, they made the switch to be more inclusive, to be more sex positive, to be more feminist, to be more racially inclusive and everything, instead of being what they previously were, and to really become a part of, the new generation. In 2023, things are different now in how we discuss masculinity than how it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So I was definitely a part of that transition. And, Men's Health has always been somewhat gay. They've had like a thinly veiled gay readership of, muscular gay men like working out. They take it very seriously. They also like looking at jacked men who are half naked, which the magazine also had as well. So like there were gay readers, but now we're just kind of more speaking to them directly. And what's really cool is, I write the column, and the column's extremely queer because I'm extremely queer. And the people who write in are often my fans and followers and readers. So they're queer people writing in. So I end up answering a bunch of queer questions. And what's been awesome, because I used to be like a low-level editor at like The Advocate and Pride.com and Out Magazine. And so I used to write a bunch for them. But I feel like I have so much more of an impact writing for Men's Health than I do anywhere else, because a lot, of men, especially bisexual men who are closeted or questioning, don't feel comfortable going to out.com. But they do feel comfortable going to Men's Health, and then all of a sudden they see that there's this queer article discussing closeted men, and they're actually okay clicking on it. So I'm able to reach a demographic who actually needs my help the most, because they are closeted, confused, questioning, have some shame, to the point that they don't feel comfortable going to the openly gay resources. And so I get a lot of messages from guys in their 40s, even 50s, 60s, being like, hey, I came out to my wife as bi because of you, and we had a great conversation. I just want to thank you, in a way that they would not have been reading my work at Out magazine. So I do love that I'm able to reach a demographic that I think is generally actually quite hard for me to reach.
Well, and I was going to ask you, as a medium with writing, like you also do make a lot of podcast appearances, and right, it's what I love is this experience is different than the written word and that medium. Do you feel that one is easier for you to traverse in terms of going into the psyche of your sexual experiences and what you want to convey, or do they both work together for your process?
It's both work together. I mean, first and foremost, I am a writer. I like to think I do good interviews and I'm well spoken, but sometimes it takes me a little bit longer of rambling to reach my point, versus obviously when I write something down, I can edit it, make it concise, and really hammer down my points. So I really prefer, if I'm making an argument, I usually prefer to write it. But I also like, when we're able to have these interviews, one-on-one, I'm able to kind of express so much more and able to answer different questions that I otherwise wouldn't be able to answer.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. And also, I think there's something to that unfiltered thought process of moving from A to B to C that resonates with
Yeah.
those listening right now. Like, oh yeah,
And
that's
I
how
think,
my mind processes.
excuse me. Yeah, and like, sometimes while thinking out loud, you're able to kind of reach a different conclusion, a way that usually wouldn't. But it's good. I'm also trying to be not just a writer, but also a personality. And and at least that's what my editor and my media team and my agent and manager and everyone calls me, where it's like they want me in front of the camera. They want me talking and giving lectures and being slutty and having me being in a Speedo and using everything I can in order to get this book sold, but really moving from just being an author to being this type of personality person.
Oh yeah, no, I predict for you, Zachary Zane, that you are going to have an explosion of just outreach. And like I could even see you in a talk show format. Like we still really don't have an openly queer talk show at all. Like there's no,
That would be fun.
you know, I propose that. I mean, I've always proposed that I want to be in a reality show, but after seeing The Real Friends of WeHo, which it's okay. I did enjoy the
I
first
didn't
episode.
see it. I didn't
Oh,
see it, but
okay.
I know social media and reviews were less than kind.
I mean, I enjoyed the personalities on it. I think that
Mhm.
I think a New York one could be interesting. I think that maybe instead of a reality show, like an education show would be, I don't know, I'm throwing it out there. Could be interesting of just these types of discussions in a more
Yeah.
yeah, in front of the camera. Okay. That could be a Fire Island show. Have an arts and
Yeah.
culture show on Fire Island.
Love
But
it.
something that I need to discuss is you have such um explicit discussions about whether it's you sucking an Uber driver off to like just because you knew that he was interested and you go through the dynamic. I found it so fascinating of, well, how do you know if your Uber driver wants to be sucked off? I'm like, huh, okay, how do you know, Zachary?
It's so funny where it's like, even though I write it, when I hear other people discussing it, I can't help but blush. I'm like, oh my God, did I really write that? It's so funny hearing other people discuss what I discussed, but it's still, I hear you saying that, I'm like, oh my God, did I really write this? And I love it. It's great.
Well, like, because when I hear
Oh,
that, I think, okay, well, what would I draw from my own experience? And I guess it would be a guy literally coming on to me in the showers at the gym on Long Island, which is itself a story. It's not like it was an
an entity.
Equinox in Manhattan, and like complimented my butt, and then like wanted to come to the shower with me, and I was like, no, 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 I'm actually like I set a boundary. I'm like, no, I'm good. I like
Good.
my privacy. I was like, that's what I have an apartment for. But okay, so I'll reveal a little of
That's funny.
myself. That way also everyone knows like that doesn't happen when I go to the gym because I like my gym membership. Uh so, do you feel though that it's easier to talk about, say, sucking off a guy or, your experiences in the bedroom with men and women than it is digging into the deep aspect of you've already brought it up, but rejection or um, you know, not being with your partner anymore? Like, is it harder to actually, especially for Boyslut, dig into those more nuances of a relationship than the
It,
hookups?
it, it- oh yeah, it was significantly harder. And I think, I really had to reflect as I'm looking back, when I pick a story to write about, it's often a story in which I grew as a person, or it's something that is a universe, something that, through my experience, I'm revealing something that's universal about human nature or about sexuality. So like, I'm not picking, like for the book, I'm not just picking a raunchy sex story and writing about it. It's something
Mhm.
where, okay, I think the reader can really learn from this or grow from this or really relates to them and their identity and what they're going through. So as I was writing some of this older stuff about kind of previous relationships that I've had in my late teens and early 20s. And it was like, yeah, I was hurting people. Not my intent. It was not done maliciously, but when you're coming from a place of sexual shame, when you're not confident about who you are, when the messages that you've received about masculinity are telling you to essentially be a fuckboy and that being a fuckboy is a good thing to be, then I was a fuckboy. And so it was challenging looking at all the people that I've hurt over my life, emotionally and romantically. Again, of course, never my intent, and I do cut myself some slack. We all make mistakes, and a lot of it is just, growing pains and stuff like that. But yeah, it required a lot of vulnerability, a lot of depth, a lot of reflection.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you go there, as all your readers I know are going to appreciate it. And why, um, even you claiming that you were a fuckboy. I mean, I have to say, I loved what is that reality show? Oh my goodness.
Fuckboy
It's
Island.
not, yeah, Fuckboy Island. Thank you.
Yeah,
I was like, did they
yeah,
use the word fuck in it? I guess they
sure
did.
did.
Yeah, because it's on HBO, right?
I don't remember, but yeah.
I don't know, one of the streaming services that are just never ending. That I have to keep like canceling my subscriptions because I don't watch them. But like what I like is you have so many readers. So like, as we're nearing the end of this conversation, I'm just curious, do you get as much delight as I do out of my like sexual exploits when I talk to my straight guy friends? Like I think I have a certain kinky fascination of like seeing if I can shock them. But I think what usually happens is they enjoy the vulnerability. They're like, wow, I wish I could like try to talk about my exploits in the way that you're relaying them to me,
Yeah.
and
I Yeah, I definitely I enjoy some of the shock value for sure. But at this point, I feel like no one's surprised with me. This is who I am. I've already, pushed the threshold, pushed the limit so much that there's literally nothing I could say, I think, that would surprise anyone at this point.
well, and do you get more feedback from a specific demographic? Like, you talked about a lot of messages from, bi men, but like, do you feel that
No,
there's, oh, go ahead.
sure. When I share with straight men, I feel like they're so kind of like set in their ways in heteronormative dynamics and gender roles when it comes to sex and their role during sex. So the fact that I'm able to break that and do something different, like I feel like I often give like straight men more permission to do things differently in a way that they didn't even think was possible. Versus gay men, because we've been ostracized and because we've been marginalized and because we have our own community, like we know there are slutty gay men. We know there are gay men who are cruising. That is a thing. And because, we didn't have marriage up until recently in the United States, and still in many places of the world we do not, when we were no longer aspiring to marriage because marriage wasn't an option, we created our own types of relationships, our own relationship with sex. We've been on the outskirts of society for so long, so we came up with alternative lifestyles. So I'm not as shocking to a gay person or a bi person, or my stories that are like showing my alternative lifestyle, again, are not necessarily as shocking to a gay or bi person as they are to a straight person, because it's just so outside the realm of what they are used to and what they frankly think is possible.
Yeah, and there's kinky straight behavior. I mean,
Of
in
course there is.
swinger situations, in sex clubs, in
Yeah.
open relationships. So I feel, it's so interesting the kind of feedback you would get from the straight community.
Yep. Excuse me.
Like saying,
Yeah,
oh, we can
absolutely.
express ourselves in such, non-traditional quote unquote ways in our sexual
Exactly.
expression. Yeah. Well, Zachary, this has been wonderful. I hope to like
Thank you so much. This
somehow
has been
run
great.
into you on Fire Island. I'll be like, okay, where's Zachary?
Oh my God. Well, hopefully I can get my butt over to Fire Island sometime in July and August. But if so, I'm excited to see you there.
Yeah. Well, and I'll see what kind of Speedo you're wearing. We'll have to
There you go. If I'm wearing one
color.
at all, who knows?
That's true. Depends where you are on Fire Island. Well,
True.
everyone out there, Zachary, this has been a pleasure. I feel like we covered all of the terrain. Um, so, everyone get your hands on Boyslut. The fabulous Billy Porter says it himself that Zachary Zane is doing the Lord's work. So I don't know what other kind of
Billy,
endorsement you want.
yeah, right. What other endorsement could you name? It's Boyslut. It's sold anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon or Bookshop. Boyslut is one word. I have a book tour that's all throughout May and June. If you check out my website, zacharyzane.com, you can see if I'm coming to a city near you. But I'll be in LA, SF, New York, Boston, Chicago, Nashville, and Montana as well, randomly. And you can follow me on social media at ZacharyZane _ on both Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you so much, Zachary. Okay, well, happy summer to everyone out there, and happy Boyslut empowering energy spirit to everyone.
Yes, love it.
Yeah, it's causing a conversation that's needed. So thank you, Zachary.
Thank you.
Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. This is Andrew Rimby, the executive director. I want you all to follow us on social media because there's so many video clips that we share and so many photos about these episodes. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Follow us on Twitter at Ivory Boiler Room. Follow our Facebook page, The Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Join our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. For $5 a month, you get ad-free episodes, our video interviews, the True Crime and Academia bonus episodes, and all Ivory Tower Boiler Room bonus episodes. Thanks for buying a coffee for me. And thanks to an amazing team. Thanks, Mary. She's our chief contributor. And thanks to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room spring interns, Andrea, Caitlin, Sarah, Sheila, and Rosie. See you all again in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.